Thank you. Thank you for responding, sir. All right. Get my notes open. How are you guys?
I'm good.
Cool.
Amazing.
Make sure I got everyone's names right here. We have Mike, correct, Ellie, and Jay. All right, we got it. So, welcome to today's panel on blockchains in the quantum era. My name is Adam Wozney, and I'll be your MC for today's conversation with these galaxy brains over here. We've all heard the quantum apocalypse threat, right? Ooh. The idea that powerful enough quantum computer could one day unmask our private keys and break the back of modern cryptography. But today we're going to move past the fear-mongering. We are joined by three experts who are currently architecting the transition from classical to post-quantum security. But before we get to our conversation, I want to introduce our awesome guests here. First up, we have Mike Berman, co-founder and co-CEO of Tectonic. Mike is the co-founder and co-CEO of Tectonic, just to reiterate that. A company focused on building quantum-secure defense infrastructure and post-quantum cryptography solutions. Michael brings a background in high-growth enterprise software and operational strategy to the burgeoning field of quantum security. Welcome, Mike. How are you doing today?
Good. It's a good.
Good. Just to kind of kick things off and kind of get to know you a bit more, I read you do mentorship for students at the University of Boulder, Colorado. Is that right?
I don't, but maybe I should.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That'd have been Mike Lauder.
I get this information on the internet. You never know.
Yeah.
Do you do any mentorship for anybody?
We'll just go with yeah. I try to help where I can, and if anyone needs any mentorship, I guess I'm available.
You're the guy to ask. All right, cool. Next up, we have Ellie Davidson, head of R&D at Espresso Systems. Ellie is a software and systems engineer known for her work in the blockchain and distributed system space. Ellie leads the development of core infrastructure designed to enhance scalability and interoperability within the Ethereum ecosystem. Welcome, Ellie. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you.
So when I was trying to do research on you guys, you're like a digital ghost. I could not find anything on you, so well done.
That's the plan. So
Yeah.
That's good.
Is there anything you'd like to let folks know about you that maybe they don't know? Any fun hobbies or interests?
I don't have any. I have a dog that I very much love.
Oh, what's your dog's name?
Her name is Moana, and she's a
Oh.
border collie.
Oh,
So
it's
she's
Disney.
pretty much my main hobby.
Okay, that counts. Any other pet owners out there? Oh, we got a bunch. All right, you got some friends in the audience. Next up, we have Jayendra Jog, co-founder of Sei Labs, the development team behind the Sei network. Jay is best known for building the first sector-specific Layer 1 blockchain designed specifically to optimize decentralized exchanges and trading applications. Is that right? I hope that's right.
It's a little outdated, but it's good to go, yeah.
Hey, we'll take it. I did read, hopefully this is right, you were on the Forbes 30 under 30 list in 2024?
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yes.
You were, though?
I was.
Okay, good. I got that right. So the Forbes list is looking for disruptors generally. So with what's the most disruptive thing you did kind of growing up that your friends or family might know about that these guys might not?
Yeah, I'm not an interesting person. I will say that we got started with Sei, and it's been a super chaotic journey since 2022. We've seen a lot of shit since then.
Excellent. We'll take it. All right, so we have a lot to cover, and keep an eye on time. I'm going to jump right into this. So I kind of just want to level set. I think most folks here are probably pretty familiar with quantum computing, but there's probably a few in the audience, and myself included, can learn just from a description of what quantum computing is. Let's just level set. What is quantum computing? You can go right to anybody.
Yeah, so I think the best example that I heard to understand a quantum computer versus a classical computer as it pertains to breaking encryption is if you think of a massive maze and you give it to a classical computer, like the most powerful classical computer that we have, and you say, what's the fastest path to the center of the maze? That computer needs to try every single path. And at the end, it'll say, okay, here was the most effective path. A quantum computer somehow can test every single path at the same time and then give you the most optimal path. So if you want to get more technical, it's classical computers, it's binary, it's zeros and ones. Quantum computers use qubits, which are entangled and held in a state of superposition. So this stuff breaks my brain every day. Our team, we're fortunate enough to have some very smart folks. So there's a guy named Ramesh who's on our team. He studied underneath Peter Shor at MIT. So we oftentimes talk about Shor's algorithm. He actually had the tutelage of Peter Shor. And oftentimes I ask him, I say, does this break your brain? brain? And his answer is always yes and no. So yeah, it's super wild to go down the rabbit hole of both quantum and quantum computers. And I encourage you all to play around with it because it's super wild.
How's that description? Is that how you guys describe quantum computing?
That's a much better description than I would have given. So yeah.
Yeah, and to elaborate, definitely I think that's how I described it if I was as eloquent as you. I think in the context of blockchains, if you have a universal quantum computer that has a bunch of, let's say, thousands of logical qubits, then it will be able to run Shor's algorithm, which then will break a lot of the cryptography that is used to help with things such as signature schemes for blockchains. So I think in the context of blockchains, we need to figure out how we can better account for that moving forward.
Right on. So I kind of want to follow up on what you're just saying, just kind of, again, maybe with my final level setting question. What do quantum native blockchains look like?
I think at a baseline, every single quantum native blockchain will have some kind of quantum safe signature scheme. I think things such as ECDSA aren't going to be working natively with, as soon as like quantum computers become universally used, you will not be able to use something like ECDSA. So baseline, it'll be changing the signature scheme. Then depending on what your blockchain does, you'll need to account for different types of scenarios as well. For example, if you have an aspect of encryption in your blockchain, you'll need to figure out how you can account for that moving forward, and then also what you can do for previous data that has already been shared, which candidly you might not be able to do that much.
I think there's your different components of a blockchain. So I think a lot of times the biggest risk that quantum faces is on the account-based model and these persistent keys. I think actually doing a quantum upgrade on the consensus layer of blockchains is quite a bit easier. Especially if you're abstracting away kind of like the balances and you're just talking about people who are signing messages to confirm something. It's less of an issue if those keys are broken later on because they can't do anything so long as you like rotate them. So for example, at Espresso, when we think about upgrading our consensus protocol to be quantum resistant, it's actually much more straightforward because we don't need to deal with the account-based model and keys that have long-term storage of assets. The other things to consider are, quantum keys tend to be, or signature schemes tend to be much larger. And right now, there's not a great way to aggregate them. And a lot of current blockchains rely heavily on signature aggregation. If you have a smaller validator set, so say like 200 or less, I think that it's less of an issue. As long as you have enough throughput, you are going to take a hit to your throughput because of the larger signatures, even if you can't aggregate them. But if you have high enough throughput, I think it's tolerable, and there's a lot of other ways that you can get higher throughput to account for that. I think where it's most detrimental is in something like Ethereum, where you genuinely have, even after they do consolidation of their keys and they're hoping to get down to like 100,000 keys instead of 1 million, that's where you start to really see the effects of having the larger signature sizes and the larger public keys.
Yeah, I don't know if I could beat those, especially 30 under 30, because I might have to be 50 under 50 at this point, which is depressing.
You're a spring chicken.
Yeah, oh boy. So one other thing to add is there is a governing body, and that's NIST, and that's why we partnered with NIST from the jump with our company. So there is a shift from elliptic curve cryptography to lattice-based, and they're constantly standardizing the signatures. So at least there's a place to go to grab the signatures that are post-quantum and then implement them in your chain.
Yeah, with regards to the size of these signatures, so something like what Sei is using right now, we're using 64-byte signatures. If we use some of the more, I think the NIST approved ones, it's like on the order of 2,000 bytes plus for any given signature. So with our next upgrade, we're going to be getting up to 200,000 transactions per second. This translates to 8 gigabits per second worth of data that needs to be propagated just from the signatures, which ends up being absolutely massive. So I think it does become a pretty meaningful problem once you get to a high enough throughput as well. I think it'll be applicable for most blockchains. In the low throughput case, it's something that you need to handle well, like Ethereum might not be able to handle it too well. In the high throughput case, it just becomes a ton of data that needs to be propagated.
Yeah, and I think it's just to clarify, it's a difference between the account-based keys. Yeah, if you're handling transactions and each transaction has to have a quantum signature, that becomes unwieldy. On the pure consensus level, though, you don't need that many transactions or that many signatures.
Right on. So I want to kind of shift a bit and talk about our favorite institution, the Federal Reserve. A 2025 Federal Reserve Board study specifically used Bitcoin as a case study for HNDL risk. And just for folks unfamiliar, HNDL is an acronym for Harvest Now, Decrypt Later, We kind of mentioned it in our first talk. It's a cyber intelligence strategy where encrypted data is intercepted and stored today, even if it cannot be read yet. The study noted that while the Bitcoin network can be patched, the privacy of every past transaction is permanently at risk. If Bitcoin requires a flag day or a hard fork to implement post-quantum security, how do we prevent quantum chain split, where the majority of value stays on the vulnerable but familiar legacy chain? Anyone want to take a shot at that one?
Yeah, I think practically people don't do anything. It's going to be quite difficult. And what I mean by that is the traditional way that you're going to have to migrate these chains, like migrate signature schemes, is by having users do something. In the case of Bitcoin, it seems like it's going to be having users literally create a new key pair and then migrate their funds from their old public or from their old address to whatever their new address is. And that's an extremely high friction thing that a lot of people that might not be as active might not even know to do. So I think in Bitcoin's case, it's actually significantly more difficult. I think for other chains, it's a little bit easier. You can still maintain the same address, so users don't need to physically move their money. They just need to add in a new key pair, and then afterwards, the old key pair will be deprecated. So I think depending on what the context for your chain is, it might be a little bit easier, but it still seems like there will be user involvement that's required, which definitely adds in a ton of complexity for any of these older assets that people might not be touching.
Any thoughts? Did it cover it?
I mean, at the end of the day, every chain is going to be different and every migration path is going to be different. And we have a ticking time bomb. So it's like a cat and mouse, right? Like, are you going to do X by Y cutoff date? And if you don't, what's going to happen, right? Are your assets going to be stolen, deprecated? And then people kind of don't really know when the threat's going to emerge. So I think if Vitalik comes out and gives it a 50% probability that Ethereum's vulnerable by 2030, you would think that everyone's going to be taking that, very seriously. And you'd think we'd be further along in the migration path, but unfortunately we're not. So I don't know if it's human nature, but everyone's aware of the problem. And I think people just think maybe it's not going to happen, or it's a hard time, or it gives people within Web3 a migraine to think about something that's not today's, ticker price on a meme coin.
I think Ethereum is a good example of a project that's doing very well, actually, at handling post-quantum. They're putting a lot of resources to it. I think that in my opinion, they will be one of the very few blockchains that is going to be ready by 2030.
Yeah, they started a team, didn't they? I think there's
they've had a team they've had a team working on it for quite a while internally before they made it public, I think. But yeah, they have specifications. They are very well in the weeds of how to make Ethereum post-quantum.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll add is that once Q day hits, you can't really migrate at that time. You need to begin the process significantly earlier, and you need to get enough time for people to actually migrate their funds or initiate whatever transactions need to be done. So you probably want to give people on the order of years to actually prepare for this. So we really need to get started ASAP if we want to be prepared for, let's say, 2030.
So yeah, I kind of want to touch on that. So large enterprises are being told by analysts like Gartner that a full transition to quantum safe security is going to cost millions, billions of dollars over the next few years. So for smaller DeFi protocols, DAO-led projects, other chains, is the cost of quantum readiness going to create a new class divide where there's only the wealthiest chains that can survive?
Well, I'll speak to it on the enterprise side because I have some experience there, and then I'll let the other panelists cover Web3. So we're in this thing called the Post-Quantum Consortium that NIST has, and we're in there with Amazon, HP, Google, IBM, et cetera. So we get to spend time with the leaders within these Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies as they try to figure out what to do for this threat. And I can give you the anecdote that I think these major organizations are behind. So everyone needs to move. Everyone's, experiencing the difficulties equally. But I don't think the U.S. government or Fortune 100 companies are further along than perhaps Ethereum Foundation for this transition. They have a little bit more time because it's dependent on breaking RSA, which will get broken later than ECDSA. But it's really tough to find a shooting star or someone that's doing super well in this migration.
To speak to the Web3 space, I think that luckily, I think that the outlook is a little bit better. So specifically for the Ethereum ecosystem, Ethereum will upgrade the EVM and they will have a model on how to handle post-quantum for Ethereum. And all of the EVM-based chains can likely use a lot of that work themselves. So I think this levels out the playing field quite a bit.
Yeah, I think to your point about whether it's going to be the wealthiest chains that have an easier time, I think it's actually the exact opposite. I think the smaller the chain is, the less users there are, the less value that's being secured, the easier it'll be for people to migrate over there. Because, I mean, less users to migrate is just going to be an easier thing to coordinate, which is why I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are actually going to be the ones that have the hardest time in theory. I mean, I think Ethereum's doing a good job of getting ready for it right now. I think Bitcoin has room for improvement over there. But yeah, like definitely smaller chains are going to have an easier time.
One final tiny point on that. A good way to look at it is centralized versus decentralized. Bitcoin's going to have a hard time. Getting anything done within that community is proven to be quite difficult and stressful. Whereas Ethereum is much more centralized. Solana is much more centralized, so they can get their ducks in a row and move faster.
So you're talking about decentralization and centralization, so I think this question might kind of tie in with that nicely. Quantum hardware is expensive. I think we all know that one. Needs dilution-free refrigerators, is incredibly finicky right now. By moving to quantum native chains, are we accidentally killing decentralization and handing the keys back to elite labs and governments?
I don't think so. I mean, if you have a blockchain that is quantum safe, it's not necessarily making it much more difficult for a user to interact with it or for a validator to run the chain. So I think from that perspective, I mean, if you're using a quantum secure signature scheme, it's not that much additional overhead, assuming you're able to cut down on the amount of data that needs to be propagated. So from that perspective, I don't think it's really going to make it much more centralized or candidly any more centralized than it is right now.
All right. So I'll maybe ask one final question, and I'll open up to the audience here. Fast forward 10 years, what does the relationship between quantum computing and blockchains look like? Existential threat, evolutionary upgrade, or something we're not even talking about yet?
So I think those were mutually exclusive, so maybe all three. And there are cool things that can be done on chain. So, you could bring quantum simulations on chain. You could do a lot by harnessing the power of quantum computers and just try to figure out, is there a need to have it on chain or not? But yeah, in terms of this migration, like who knows? But a lot of it's dependent on when are we going to have the breakthrough that leads to a more powerful quantum computer. So if you talk to a bunch of different quantum PhDs and people from the hardware companies, they believe that a breakthrough is coming. We just don't have line of sight on what that breakthrough will be. One comp we often talk about is the attention paper that got spun out of Google. Like, I don't think anyone knew when that paper came out that within 5 years we would have this race with LLMs and a ton of money pouring in. So something like that might happen on the quantum hardware side, where one of these approaches proves to be the most prudent, and then everyone else kind of starts dumping in money. And then the final piece here is we've kind of lost sight on what's happening in China, who I think before we knew where they were advancing. So there is a little bit of an east versus west, and like, what's the difference between Google getting this quantum computer versus China, and what are the ramifications? If it happens at Google, your Bitcoin's probably safe. If it happens in North Korea, your Bitcoin's probably lost. So, there's a lot of different constituents. So we'll see what happens.
Let's see what time. I think we have maybe time for one or two questions in the audience. Raise your hand. I'll come grab you a mic. Oh, we got one way in the back. Come on, man.
We talked about, I guess, harvest now, decrypt later, and its threat to Bitcoin in particular. But Bitcoin is built around, signing things, and you can't forge a signature or an ECDSA signature until you have a quantum computer. What is the kind of role of harvest now and decrypt later as a threat as it relates to Bitcoin?
I mean, I think specifically, even in the UTXO model, you have people who have UTXOs who don't touch them for many years, like all of Satoshi's, for example, his funds, those would all be vulnerable to that.
Wow. Looks like you answered all the questions. Is there any maybe final thoughts you'd like to let? Oh, we got one. You just in time. You're almost cut off.
No one else can do it. So you got companies like IonQ and IBM and all these guys forecasting roughly having enough qubits, logical or physical, 2028, 2029 or something like that, right? So we're talking about the migration of something like Ethereum or Bitcoin. And Ethereum wants to use account abstraction and zero knowledge Starks and lattice-based, whatever, they're wanting to use. But I mean, realistically something that can get done in 5 years if you're going to take IBM and IonQ at face value for what they're saying, because, Vitalik said they were going to have staking in 2019 and, it was 2023. And I realize this is like a order of magnitude more serious an issue, but realistically speaking, can it get done?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it comes down to how much you believe in the Ethereum community. It's like a philosophical question rather than a technical one. I personally am very bullish on the work that they're doing. They're taking it incredibly seriously. And just on a different level, I think that they're also just taking other upgrades to the Ethereum network very seriously, and they're planning to ship them much faster. But I mean, it's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, I'm much more bearish on the other upgrades that you're talking about, but I do think for something that is as existential as this, the community will be able to rally. I think what's helpful in Ethereum's case is there is kind of a North Star in a direction that they've set, so I think it'll be much easier for them to coordinate here. In Bitcoin's case, it seems like even that's not done as clearly yet.
All right, so final question. Any closing thoughts you guys want to let folks know here that maybe we haven't discussed here today? Anything top of mind for you right now?
No, I'll just wave to my parents again who are here.
Oh, round of applause for his parents,
look how pretty
guys.
my mom looks.
Love that.
Thank
Love that
you.
they're here. That's great. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for joining, and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you, guys.